Hello and welcome.
Hi there.
Today we're going to be talking about work permits in Canada.
Oh.
It's a system that can be a little bit difficult to wrap your head around, so we're going to try to break it down for you.
Sounds good.
We'll be talking about the main things that you need to know.
Okay.
And we are using information from the official Canadian government website, canada.ca.
All right.
This information was updated this year in 2024.
Great.
So it's all up to date. And this should help you learn if you need a labor market impact assessment or LMIA to work in Canada.
Okay, so to start, it's really important to understand what an LMIA is.
Okay.
And when it's needed.
Right.
An LMIA is a document that a Canadian employer might need to get before they can hire a worker from another country.
Okay.
The LMIA shows the Canadian government that there is a need for a worker from another country to do a specific job in Canada.
Right.
It also shows that no Canadian citizen or permanent resident is available to do the job.
So an LMIA is essentially a way for the government to make sure that Canadian jobs are being filled by Canadians first.
Exactly.
And that foreign workers are only being brought in when there is a real need.
Yes, a great way to put it.
Okay.
The LMIA process helps to protect Canadian workers and ensures that the hiring of foreign workers benefits the Canadian economy.
Okay.
It's important to remember that if an employer needs an LMIA, the worker can only apply for a work permit after the LMIA is approved.
So if I understand correctly, the LMIA is a crucial first step for many foreign workers who want to work in Canada.
Yes.
Once the LMIA is approved.
Yeah.
What documents would someone need to apply for a work permit?
Okay, so to apply for a work permit, you will need a few key things. First, you'll need a job offer letter from the Canadian employer.
All right.
This letter needs to explain the details of the job.
Okay.
It should include information about your pay, deductions, job duties, and conditions of employment.
So essentially it outlines what you will be doing, how much you will be paid.
Exactly.
And the terms of your employment.
That's right. You'll also need a contract with your employer that outlines these details in a formal agreement.
Right.
And of course, if your employer needed an LMIA, you'll need a copy of that approved LMIA and the LMIA number.
That makes perfect sense.
Good.
You need a formal job offer.
Yes.
And a clear understanding of the terms of your employment.
Absolutely.
But you mentioned earlier that an employer may need an LMIA.
Yes.
Are there cases when an employer doesn't need an LMIA?
Yes, you are absolutely correct.
To hire a foreign worker?
Not all employers need an LMIA to hire a foreign worker.
Okay.
There are a few different situations where an LMIA is not required. One example is the International Mobility Program. This program allows certain foreign workers to come to Canada without an LMIA.
Okay.
These workers often have specific skills or qualifications that are in high demand in Canada.
So the International Mobility Program recognizes that there are times when Canada needs skilled workers from other countries, even if there are Canadians who could potentially fill those roles.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
It seems like a way to balance the needs of the Canadian workforce with the demands of a globalized economy.
Yes, the International Mobility Program helps to ensure that Canada remains competitive in the global marketplace.
Okay.
And can attract the talent it needs to support economic growth. In addition to the International Mobility Program, there are other specific situations where an LMIA is not needed. These are called LMIA exemptions.
So there are different rules depending on the specific job and the worker's situation.
That's right.
It sounds like it can get quite complicated.
It can be, but the Canadian government has a system to help make it easier to understand.
Okay.
They use LMIA exemption codes to categorize different situations where an LMIA is not required.
Okay.
These codes help employers and workers determine if they need an LMIA or if they qualify for an exemption.
That sounds helpful.
Yeah.
It must provide some much-needed clarity for those navigating this process.
Yes.
So what happens if an employer doesn't need an LMIA?
Okay, so if an employer doesn't need an LMIA,
is there a different process they need to follow?
They will usually use something called the employer portal to submit information about the job offer to the Canadian government. This is an online system that allows employers to provide details about the job, such as the job title, duties, salary, and location.
So even though they don't need an LMIA, they still need to go through a formal process to inform the government about the job offer.
The employer portal is a key part of this process.
Okay.
The portal generates a special number called the Offer of Employment number. This number is very important for the worker who is applying for the work permit.
It sounds like this offer of employment number is a bit like a green light from the government.
Yeah.
Indicating that the job offer has been reviewed and approved.
That's a good analogy.
Oh.
It shows that the government is aware of the job offer and has no objections to the employer hiring a foreign worker for that specific role.
So just to clarify, even if an employer doesn't need an LMIA,
yes,
the worker still needs this offer of employment number.
In most cases, yes.
To apply for their work permit.
But there are some exceptions.
No?
Some employers who are exempt from the LMIA requirements also don't need to use the employer portal.
Oh.
These employers won't have an offer of employment number to give to the worker.
It seems like there are always exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that these are very specific cases.
Yeah.
It sounds like it would be helpful to provide an example of one of these situations.
Absolutely.
Make it clearer for our listeners.
Let's consider the case of someone who is coming to Canada to work for a foreign government, a diplomatic mission, a consular post, or a recognized international organization. These individuals still need a work permit to work in Canada, but the process for their employers is a little different.
So even though they represent a foreign government or organization, they still need permission from the Canadian government to work here.
Yes.
It makes sense that there would be a specific process for this type of situation.
In these cases, the employer doesn't have to get an LMIA or submit an offer of employment through the employer portal.
Sure.
They also don't have to pay the employer compliance fees that other employers do.
That sounds like it simplifies the process for these employers.
Yes.
Does the worker still need to apply for a work permit even though their employer doesn't need an LMIA or an offer of employment number?
Yes, the worker still needs to apply for a work permit. And there are specific steps they need to follow on the application form to make sure it's processed correctly.
It sounds like these specific instructions are really important.
Yes, they are.
Could you walk us through those steps so that our listeners understand what to do if they find themselves in this situation?
Of course. Let's say you're applying for a work permit to work for a foreign mission in Canada. When you fill out the work permit application form, you will be asked what type of work permit you are applying for. In this case, you would select Other.
So you wouldn't choose a specific work permit category.
Right.
You would simply select Other.
Correct.
That makes sense given that this is a unique situation.
Yes.
What about the section on the application that asks for an LMIA number or an offer of employment number?
You would leave that field blank. Remember, your employer doesn't need an LMIA or an offer of employment number for these types of positions.
Right, because the standard requirements don't apply in this case.
That's right.
So we've selected Other as the work permit type.
Yes.
And left the LMIA and offer of employment fields blank.
Correct.
What's the next step in the application?
The next question on the application will ask if you have a written job offer from an employer in Canada. Even though the process is different, you still need a job offer from your employer. You would answer yes to this question.
It's interesting that a job offer is still required, even though the employer doesn't need to go through the LMIA or employer portal process. It shows that a formal job offer is a fundamental requirement for anyone seeking to work in Canada.
Exactly. A job offer is a cornerstone of the work permit application process. It demonstrates that you have secured employment in Canada and helps to support your application.
So after confirming that you have a written job offer, what's next on the application form?
The following question on the application will ask what type of work permit you want to apply for. For employees of foreign missions, governments, and organizations, you would select a work permit with a labor market impact assessment exemption.
It seems like that's a key step in the process.
It is.
Making it clear that you are exempt from the standard LMIA requirements. It ensures that your application is reviewed under the correct category.
Precisely. By selecting this option, you are signaling to the immigration officials that your situation falls under a specific exemption and that your application should be assessed accordingly.
So we've clarified the type of work permit, indicated that we have a job offer, and specified that we are exempt from the LMIA.
Yes.
Is there anything else that needs to be done on the application form?
Yes. One final step. You'll need to upload your employment contract or a letter from your employer as a supporting document. This is usually done in a section labeled Letter from Current Employer.
It seems like this supporting documentation is crucial.
It is.
For verifying the details of the job offer.
Yeah.
And ensuring that everything aligns with the information provided on the application form.
You're absolutely right. The supporting documents provide evidence to support your claims
Okay.
and help the immigration officials make an informed decision about your work permit application.
So to recap, it sounds like the key to successfully applying for a work permit as an employee of a foreign mission, government, or organization
Yes.
is to carefully follow the specific instructions on the application form,
Right.
making sure to select the right options and provide all the required documentation.
Exactly. By paying attention to the details and following the correct procedures, you can significantly increase your chances of a smooth and successful application process.
Oh, right.
It's also essential to remember that we've only covered one specific scenario in this episode.
Right.
There are many other nuances and complexities to the Canadian work permit system.
You've made that very clear throughout our conversation.
Yeah.
It's a complex system with many different pathways and requirements.
Yes.
It can be overwhelming for those who aren't familiar with the intricacies of Canadian immigration law.
You're right. There are many different rules and regulations, and it's not always easy to know where to start.
Yeah.
That's why it's always a good idea to consult with an immigration expert or lawyer if you
Right.
have any questions or concerns.
They can provide personalized guidance and support to help you navigate the system successfully.
Sound advice.
Yeah.
Having a professional on your side can make a world of difference when dealing with complex immigration matters.
Absolutely.
Now, we've talked a lot about job offers in this episode.
Yes, we have.
Can you clarify what exactly a job offer letter needs to include?
Of course. A job offer letter is a formal document from the employer that outlines the key details of the job being offered.
Okay.
It should include information about your pay,
Okay.
any deductions, your job responsibilities and duties, and your conditions of employment.
So it's a comprehensive overview of the terms of employment, covering everything from salary and benefits to working hours and job duties.
Yes.
It's important to have this information clearly outlined in writing
It is.
to avoid any misunderstandings down the road.
Precisely. A well-written job offer letter protects both the employer and the employee by ensuring that everyone is on the same page.
And that there are no ambiguities about the terms of the employment agreement.
It's also important to understand the difference between a job offer letter and an offer of employment.
Yes, you're right. We've used both terms in this episode.
We have.
And it would be helpful to clarify the distinction for our listeners.
Yes.
What's the difference between a job offer letter and an offer of employment?
Okay.
A job offer letter is a more general document that can be used in any situation where someone is being offered a job.
Right. Yeah.
An offer of employment is a specific document that is submitted by the employer through the employer portal. Remember, this is only for employers who don't need an LMIA to hire a foreign worker.
So to clarify, a job offer letter is a broader term for any formal document outlining a job offer.
That's right.
An offer of employment specifically refers to the document submitted through the employer portal.
Yes.
By LMIA-exempt employers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's an important distinction to keep in mind, especially when navigating the specific requirements for work permits in Canada.
It seems like there are a lot of nuances to the language used in the Canadian immigration system.
There are.
It's important to pay attention to the terminology and understand the specific meaning of each term.
Absolutely.
To avoid any confusion.
The language used in immigration law can be very specific, and even slight variations in wording can have significant implications.
Yeah.
It's always best to err on the side of caution and seek clarification if you're unsure about the meaning of a particular term or phrase.
Makes sense. Now, just to recap.
Yes.
We mentioned earlier that some employers are exempt from both the LMIA requirement and the requirement to submit an offer of employment through the employer portal.
Right.
Can you give us some more details about how that works
Yes.
and what those situations might be?
Let's say you are offered a job by a university in Canada to be a visiting professor. This type of job might be exempt from both the LMIA and the offer of employment requirements.
So in that case, what would I need to do to get a work permit?
You would still need to apply for a work permit. Okay.
But instead of providing an LMIA number or an offer of employment number, you would need to include other documents that support your application.
Okay.
These documents might include a letter from the university explaining the terms of your employment.
Okay.
And why you are exempt from the usual requirements.
It sounds like there are a lot of different rules and situations when it comes to Canadian work permits.
There are.
It's important for anyone considering working in Canada to do their research.
Yes.
And understand the specific requirements that apply to their situation.
You're absolutely right. The Canadian work permit system is designed to be fair and transparent.
Oh?
But it can also be quite complex.
Yes, it can.
It's essential to carefully review the information on the official Canadian government website to ensure you have a clear understanding of the process and the documents you'll need.
That's excellent advice. The Canadian government website is a valuable resource for anyone seeking information about working in Canada.
We'll be sure to include a link to the website in the description of this episode.
Right.
So our listeners can easily access the most up-to-date information.
That's a great idea. It's always best to go directly to the source for the most accurate and reliable information. The website provides detailed guidance on the various work permit categories, LMIA requirements, exemptions, and application procedures.
This has been an incredibly informative discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise on Canadian work permits.
You're very welcome.
I think our listeners now have a much better understanding of the complexities of the system and the steps they need to take to work in Canada legally.
It's been my pleasure to help clarify this important topic. I encourage anyone who's interested in working in Canada to do their due diligence. Research the requirements carefully and consult with an immigration professional if needed.
Great advice.
With proper planning and preparation, the process can be much smoother and less daunting.
That's a great point. It's always wise to seek professional guidance when navigating complex legal matters like immigration.
Yes.
Well, that brings us to the end of our discussion on Canadian work permits. We hope you found this episode informative and helpful.
It's been a pleasure joining you today.
To all our listeners, thank you for tuning in. We encourage you to subscribe to our show for more in-depth discussions on a variety of topics. Be sure to check the links in the description for additional resources on Canadian work permits, and have a great day.